What did you think would never happen to you until it did?
A flock of birds shit on me.
And they missed everyone else standing nearby. It happened on a bright Saturday afternoon. I was standing in the park with a few friends, enjoying the weather, when I heard the unmistakable sound of wings flapping overhead. A massive flock of pigeons had just taken off from a nearby tree.
I barely had time to register it before I felt the first splatter hit my shoulder, then another.
And another.
Within seconds, it was like I had walked under a paint bucket filled with the worst kind of white drizzle. At first, I froze. The initial shock hadn't even worn off before I realized something even worse. No one else got hit. Not a single drop on my friends, the random people around us, or even the bench I was standing next to. Just me. My friends stared. Then one of them let out a laugh that quickly spread until the entire group was bent over, gasping for air.
I stood there, arms slightly raised, in absolute disbelief. People I didn't even know were pointing. A guy walking his dog actually stopped to take a picture. I was too stunned to be embarrassed at first, but that changed quickly when I felt something drip down my forehead.
My survival instincts kicked in, and I bolted toward the nearest restroom, leaving my friends crying with laughter behind me. I could still hear them cackling as I yanked open the door, desperate to scrub myself clean.
Inside, I caught my reflection in the mirror and nearly gagged.
It was worse than I thought. My shirt was ruined, my hair looked like an abstract art piece, and the smell, oh God, the smell.
I grabbed a handful of paper towels and started wiping, but it was useless.
It just smeared. My only option was to take my shirt off and do the best I could in the sink. The bathroom door swung open, and a guy walked in just in time to see me, shirtless, furiously scrubbing bird crap off my arms.
He made eye contact for half a second before backing out without a word. Eventually, I cleaned up enough to leave, but my dignity was in shambles.
I stepped outside, only to find my friends still losing their minds. One of them had the audacity to ask if I wanted to go get food.
As if I wasn't still radiating the scent of a pigeon-infested dumpster. I told them I was going home.
One of them, between gasps of laughter, offered me a ride, but I knew I'd never live it down if I sat in his car like that. I took the walk of shame all the way back to my apartment. By the time I got home, my phone had blown up with messages, pictures, videos.
Someone had even made a slow-motion edit of the exact moment I got obliterated.
It was already in the group chat with a dozen laughing emojis.
I wanted to be mad, but honestly,
even I had to admit, it was kind of hilarious.
Tragic, but hilarious. To this day, no one knows why I was the sole target. Was it my outfit? My shampoo?
Some karmic punishment for a past life crime? I'll never know. But one thing's for sure, whenever I hear wings flapping overhead, I move fast.
Homelessness for just under 4 years total. Never thought it'd happen to me. But life doesn't care what you think.
One day, I was just another guy with a job, an apartment, and a normal routine.
Then a layoff hit. Savings dried up. And a few bad breaks later, I was sleeping in my car. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just a rough patch.
A month at most.
But months turned into years, and temporary started feeling a lot like permanent. The first few weeks were the hardest. I tried to keep up appearances, parking in different places each night, sneaking into a gym to shower, showing up at job interviews with the last bit of decent clothing I had. But rejection after rejection wore me down.
Employers saw the gaps in my awesome, the exhaustion in my face.
It's funny, once you fall far enough, people stop seeing you as someone who just needs a break. You become invisible, or worse, a problem to avoid. Eventually, I stopped trying to fake normal.
Shelters were full, and even if they had space, they weren't always safe.
So I adapted.
I learned which parking lots wouldn't get me towed, which gas stations didn't care if I hung around too long. I figured out how to stretch a few dollars into meals that lasted days. My car became my everything: bed, closet, living room.
But winter didn't care about my setup.
When the cold hit, it hit hard.
Sleeping in a frozen car felt like my body was slowly shutting down. There were nights I thought I wouldn't wake up.
Nights where I almost didn't care if I did. But somehow I kept going.
I found odd jobs under the table gigs that paid just enough to scrape by. I met others in the same situation. People who'd been out there even longer than me.
We shared food, tips, sometimes just a little conversation to remind each other we were still human. That was the worst part, losing that sense of being part of the world. It felt like I was just existing, not living. The turning point came when I ran into an old friend.
They barely recognized me. I could see it in their face, the shock, the hesitation. I wanted to lie, say I was fine, but something in me cracked. I told them the truth. No sugarcoating. No pride.
Just raw honesty. And for the first time in years, someone actually listened. They didn't judge, didn't lecture. They just asked, "What do you need?"
That question changed everything.
They helped me find a job, something steady.
Let me crash on their couch while I saved up.
It was slow, painfully slow, but for the first time in forever, I was moving forward. I got a tiny apartment, nothing special, but it had a door that locked, a place to sleep that wasn't my car.
I cried the first night, just from the sheer relief of not waking up cold.
It took time to shake the survival mindset, to stop hoarding food like I'd lose everything again overnight. Even now, years later, it still lingers.
I keep extra blankets, always have a backup plan. I don't waste food. People say, that's in the past now. But when you've been there, you never fully forget. You see the world differently.
I notice every person sleeping on a bench, every car packed with someone's entire life.
I know how easy it is to end up there, and I know how hard it is to climb back out.
So yeah, homelessness for just under 4 years total.
Thought it'd never happen to me, but I also never thought I'd make it out.
And yet, here I am. Both of my parents passing away before I even reached 30. Never thought it'd happen. You always assume you have time, that they'll be there for your milestones, that old age will take them slowly, not suddenly. But life doesn't care about assumptions. First, it was my MOM, cancer. By the time they found it, there wasn't much they could do.
She fought though, fought so damn hard. But cancer doesn't care about effort. 1 year after her diagnosis, she was gone.
Losing her wrecked me, but at least I had my dad.
We leaned on each other, tried to piece together what life looked like without her.
He was my rock, even when I could see he was barely holding it together himself.
We'd sit in silence a lot, just existing in the same space, trying to figure out how to live with the absence of someone who was always there.
I thought the worst had already happened.
I had no idea how wrong I was.
A year later, it was a phone call in the middle of the night.
A car accident.
Drunk driver. My dad never even saw it coming.
I remember standing there, still half asleep, listening to the words but not understanding them.
It didn't feel real. How could it? My dad, the man who raised me, who was just here, was suddenly gone.
I was 28, and in the span of 2 years, I had no parents left.
Just like that, I was alone. Grief is weird. It doesn't hit all at once.
It sneaks up in the quiet moments when I went to call him out of habit, when I saw something funny and thought, I have to tell him about this, and then I'd remember.
I wasn't just grieving him. I was grieving the future I thought I'd have.
No parents at my wedding. No one to call for advice. No family home to go back to.
Just me, carrying their memories, trying to figure out what to do next. People don't know what to say when you've lost both parents young. They hit you with the usual lines, they're in a better place. At least they're together. You're so strong. None of it helps.
I wasn't strong.
I was barely functioning. Some days, I'd get through work and go home, sit in silence, and wonder if I'd ever feel normal again. Other days, I was angry. At the world, at fate, at the drunk driver who walked away unscathed. But time moves forward whether you're ready or not. I started doing things to feel connected to them, cooking my mom's favorite recipes, going to my dad's favorite fishing spot.
I kept their numbers in my phone for years, unable to delete them. Eventually, the grief didn't go away, but it became something I carried differently.
Lighter, maybe.
Not less important, just more manageable. Like an old scar instead of an open wound. Now, I'm 32, and I still have moments where I reach for my phone to call them. I still have dreams where they're alive, and I wake up feeling like I lost them all over again. But I also have moments where I remember them and smile instead of cry. I hear my mom's voice in my head when I cook. My dad's laugh when I watch the movies he loved.
They're gone, but they're not. Not really. They shaped who I am. And that part of them, that's still here. Both of my parents passing away before I even reached 30. Never thought it'd happen.
But I also never thought I'd survive it. And yet, somehow I did. Someone would murder my daughter. Never in my worst nightmares did I think I'd say those words.
You hear about things like this on the news. Stories that feel distant, tragic, but impersonal. Until it happens to you. Until you're the one getting the call. The one collapsing to the floor. The one realizing your world just got torn in half. My daughter, my baby girl, was gone. And someone took her from me. The details didn't come all at once.
At first, it was just, there's been an incident, then it was. She didn't make it. The worst part.
I didn't even understand what had happened at first. My brain refused to process it.
I kept thinking it was a mistake, that any second now she'd call me, annoyed that I was freaking out.
But the truth didn't wait for me to be ready. It hit like a train, violent, irreversible, and devastating. She had been walking home, broad daylight.
A neighborhood she'd been in 1,000 times.
Then some monster, because that's what he was. Not a person. A monster decided she wouldn't make it home. It wasn't random.
He knew her.
That made it worse.
Someone who had smiled at her, spoken to her, pretended to be human. And then one day, he decided her life was his to take.
I still can't say his name without shaking. I don't want to give him that power. The days after felt like I was moving through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The funeral didn't feel real. The condolences didn't either.
People said things like, "She's in a better place," as if that was supposed to bring me peace.
Her place was here, with me.
Growing up, laughing, making mistakes, living a life that wasn't supposed to end before mine.
The rage burned so hot it scared me.
But grief and rage hold hands.
They always do. The trial dragged on, each hearing another knife in my chest.
I sat there, listening to the details, the evidence, the way they had to spell out every horrific thing that happened.
He showed no remorse.
None. I don't know what's worse, that he did it, or that he didn't even care.
When the guilty verdict came down, people called it justice. It wasn't. Justice would have been her walking through my door, safe, alive.
This was just
a consequence.
But not justice.
Years have passed, but grief doesn't follow a timeline.
It sneaks up when I least expect it.
I'll hear a song she loved, see someone her age, and it'll hit me all over again.
The world moved on, but I didn't. I don't think I ever really will. I carry her with me in everything I do, in every breath I take that she doesn't get to. I wonder who she would have been, what life she would have built.
Those are the questions that will never have answers.
I don't forgive him.
People love to talk about closure, about healing, but some wounds don't close. And honestly, I don't want them to.
My grief is proof she existed, that she was loved, that her life mattered.
I refuse to let her be reduced to just a victim. She was vibrant, stubborn, hilarious, kind. She was my daughter, and that means something.
That would always mean something. Someone would murder my daughter. I never thought it would happen to me, but it did.
And now, I live with the weight of to live hers and mine.
Because if she doesn't get to live hers, I have to carry her memory in every second of mine.
Found out I was the guy in the friend group everyone kept around as a joke.
The one they messed with, laughed at, not with.
And the worst part, I really thought they cared about me.
I loved them like family. I would have done anything for them.
And for years, I believed they felt the same. Until the night I overheard them talking, not just joking around, really tearing into me.
Saying things I can never unhear.
It was at a party, one I wasn't even supposed to be at. But someone let it slip, so I showed up. I was in the kitchen grabbing a drink when I heard my name from the other room.
Curiosity got the best of me, so I listened. At first, it was small stuff jokes about how clueless I was, how I never caught on. Then it got worse.
They laughed about how easy it was to mess with me, how they invited me just to see what dumb thing I'd do next. One of them, someone I thought was my closest friend, straight up said, "I don't even know why he thinks we actually like him." The rest laughed.
I stood there, drink in hand, feeling my entire world tilt.
It wasn't like in movies where people storm out dramatically.
I just stood there, frozen, as years of memories reassembled themselves in a new, brutal light. Every inside joke, every nickname, every time they forgot to invite me suddenly made sense. I don't even remember leaving. I just walked. My phone buzzed a few times, probably them wondering where I went, but I ignored it. I sat on a bench for what felt like hours, replaying everything in my head.
Were any of the good moments even real? Was I ever actually their friend, or was I just entertainment?
I had no idea who I was without them. They were my people, except
I was never theirs. The next day, I cut them off. No explanations, no confrontations, just silence. A couple of them reached out, but I couldn't even bring myself to respond. What would I say? Hey, I know I was your personal joke for years, but no hard feelings.
I wasn't about to beg for respect. I deserved better. Even if I didn't feel like it at the time, I knew I did. So I deleted their numbers, left the group chats, and let them go. At first, it was lonely. I almost went back, almost convinced myself I was overreacting, that maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. But then I remembered how easily they laughed at me. How none of them ever stopped it. That kept me from crawling back. Instead,
I forced myself to do something I should have done a long time ago, find real friends.
People who didn't make me feel like a walking punchline.
It took time, but I did. And man, the difference is night and day.
I don't have to second guess every laugh. Don't have to wonder if they actually like me.
Because they show it. They check in, include me, make me feel like I belong. It's not about having a big friend group, it's about having the right people around you. And I finally do. Found out I was the guy in the friend group everyone kept around as a joke.
Thought it would break me, and for a while, it did. But looking back, losing them was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wanting to die. Never thought that would be me. I used to think people who felt that way just needed to focus on the positives or push through. I didn't get it. Not really.
But life has a way of humbling you.
It wasn't one big thing that broke me, just 1,000 small ones stacking up until I couldn't carry them anymore. One day, I woke up and realized I wasn't looking forward to anything.
And then, eventually, I just didn't want to wake up at all. At first, I ignored it, told myself I was just tired, just stressed, just having a rough patch.
But it wasn't a patch, it was quicksand.
I stopped answering texts, stopped making plans.
Even food lost its appeal.
I'd sit in my car for hours after work, staring at nothing, wondering what the point was. No dramatic sobbing, no big breakdown, just this quiet, suffocating emptiness that made everything feel pointless.
The scariest part,
how normal it started to feel.
Like I wasn't even sad anymore. Just done. I wasn't thinking about how to fix things. I was thinking about how easy it would be to just stop existing.
That's when it hit me, this wasn't just stress or a phase.
This was something darker. Something that wasn't going to go away on its own.
But by then, I didn't even have the energy to care.
One night, I sat in bed, staring at my phone, debating whether to tell someone. I typed out a message to a friend, then deleted it, over and over.
What if they thought I was overreacting?
What if they didn't care? But something in me, some tiny part that wasn't ready to give up, finally hit send.
I expected indifference.
Instead, they called immediately. No hesitation. Just, hey, I'm here. Talk to me. And for the first time in a long time, I did. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it cracked the door open.
They convinced me to get help, to talk to someone who actually knew how to deal with this.
Therapy wasn't magic, but it was something.
It gave me words for what I was feeling, made me realize I wasn't broken, just stuck. Slowly, painfully, I started climbing out.
Not in big, dramatic steps, but in tiny, barely noticeable ones.
And somehow, I kept going. I won't lie and say I'm 100% okay now.
Some days, the weight still creeps back in. But the difference is, I don't carry it alone anymore.
I don't bottle it up. Don't tell myself it's nothing. I reach out. I let people in. And I remind myself that the darkest moments lie. They make you think nothing will ever change. But it does. It takes time and help. And a lot of patience. But it does. Looking back, I don't even recognize the person I was in those moments. I wish I could go back and tell them what I know now, that they weren't alone, that they mattered, that it was okay to ask for help, that their story wasn't over. Because it wasn't. I thought I wanted to die. But really, I just didn't know how to keep living.
And I'm so damn glad I figured it out. Wanting to die. Never thought that would be me.
But I also never thought I'd make it through.
And yet, here I am.